What is Aeternum? That depends on you.
Hey, what's going on, YouTube? We're back today with another build guide video. Today's video is going to involve the Great Axe. We're going to go over the abilities that it has and the passives. I'm currently equipped with a 363 gear score Great Axe, does 664 damage, and it has strength as an attribute. If you look in the blue lettering that's in the middle of my screen, for attributes you want strength. Great Axe scales with strength. Okay, so the Great Axe you have will do more damage with the higher amount of strength you have. I currently am sitting at 197 strength at level 33. That is because all my armor that I have is strength attributed. So 13 strength, 13 strength, 14 strength, 13 strength, 13 strength. I did this to min-max the amount of damage output I could have to show off the weapon a little better, because the Great Axe is probably one of the funnest weapons that you could play, in my opinion. I personally love the Great Axe. I used it in alpha, and I'm using it currently in beta. It deals a large amount of damage very fast, and it's got some of the best crit modifiers in the game. And by that, you'll see later when I go over the abilities what I mean. So, as you can see from my gear, I'm strength attributed. As much as possible, you want to get as much strength as possible to hit like a truck. Now, for your armor, as you can see right here, I have light armor on. I did this for a reason. You can do strength with any of the weights. Any of the weight buffs will work for strength. If you want to survive a little longer, you can do a heavy armor weight buff, because that will allow you to block more and allow your debuffs that you apply to last longer, like slowing, rooting, stunning, aka any of those debuffs. But me personally, I like to play glass cannon, so I'm using light armor with strength, so I can get the 20% bonus damage from wearing light armor, and my dodge is a large dodge. So if you read what it says for light buff, it says while wearing light armor, your dodge is a quick roll that covers a lot of distance, and I deal 20% bonus damage. So I float like a butterfly and sting like a bee, basically. And that's the point of what I was trying to get across for this build that I'm doing for weapon mastery. Now we're going to go over the individual abilities first, and then we'll go over the passives. You're going to start off with Reap. This is a ability that extends your axe 5 meters in front of you and pulling the enemies towards you, dealing a fair amount of damage. If you have a taunt gem, you can put the taunt gem on the weapon, and that will become a taunt. So every time you use the ability, it'll taunt the enemy you pull as well. I wouldn't suggest doing that if you're going glass cannon, because you don't want things hitting you, because you will die fast if you're building how I'm building. But if you go heavy armor and you want to help out your tank, you can do that because you'll be able to sustain a couple hits. For the next ability you unlock, you're going to get Charge. Charge is basically a move that you'll run a certain distance and then swing with your axe. So you're charging, you're running and then swinging. So it does more damage than your Reap. Execute is one of the strongest abilities in the game, in my opinion, because once again, it's an execute. Anything execute is strong. You know, at a certain point in their HP, they're dead. That's not zero. So execute is a powerful overhead attack dealing 200% weapon damage. That is insane. Even without being at a certain percent health, you're still doing 200% base weapon damage. That's 200% your weapon damage just for hitting it. Even if they're not low health. It's a good starter move, because by the time you get them low, that your cooldown might be back to execute. It really depends on what you're fighting. If you're fighting a tank or if you're fighting a boss, spam it like crazy. The execute part is the 300% weapon damage for enemies under half. So you're getting an extra 100% of damage for enemies under half HP. That's the execute part. So if you hit someone under half, they're most likely going to get demolished by this ability. Now we're going to go through the passives. For the passives on Reap, the first connected one is the range increases. This is pretty good for just reaching the next passives. It's not, I wouldn't suggest putting a point in here if you didn't need to, but because you want to get to these bottom passives that are connected, you need to put a point there. It just allows you to reach a little longer. 8 meters is not entirely that far, but it's allowing you to extend your reach. The next passive, heal yourself for 30% of damage done by Reap. That is amazing. okay? Because this ability can crit. If this ability crits, you do healing of 30% to yourself. Any type of self-heal on any ability is going to be useful in this game. So it allows you to heal yourself with your ability for a little portion. That's really, really good. Fatal Attraction is the last ability on that tree for Reap, so the last connected one. And what Fatal Attraction does is adds an extra 115 weapon damage to your Reap. So now what you're doing is you're pulling them in, and you're going to spin in a circle and hit them. So you're doing the 110% weapon damage on the initial grab, and then you're going to do an extra 115 weapon damage after you grab them. So it's basically doubling your damage, which scales with your Hunger passive that heals you for 30% of your damage. So you see how that works. 200% damage, and you're healing for 30% of the damage done. If you crit on this ability on both hits, the initial hit and the second hit, you're going to heal yourself by a lot. Moving on to the second ability, Charge. I personally wouldn't put points into this right off the bat. Maybe if you have some points extra, I would put them into the points for Charge, but the first passive is 120, 100 to 140% weapon damage based on how far you traveled. So it basically allows you to do 20% extra damage at max range, because initially you do 120. So it's giving you a chance to do 20% more damage if you go further. This ability is called Frenzied Momentum. The next ability is Unpredictable Strike. During charge, you may press your right mouse button to execute a swing, dealing 140 to 165% weapon damage based on how far you traveled. It's saying you can right mouse button. You can basically click to swing for more damage. So I'm going to assume, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, that this ability that deals 120% at the end of your charge is now changed into a strike whenever you want. So you're going to charge, and then it's going to deal 20 to 65% more damage than you already initially were going to do if you didn't have it slotted. Just because, like I said prior, I wouldn't put points in this myself, because your main damages are going to come from your Reap and your Execute and your passive that I'm going to read in a second. But I wouldn't personally slot any of these unless you have some extra points. Then I would slot them, but I would focus mainly on Reap and Execute. So now your passives. We're going to go over passives. Your first passive is going to be Executioner Speed, or your first row of passives. Hitting 2+ targets with a single great attack, light attack swing grants 3 seconds of 20% haste. So if you're hitting multiple targets, you get a little bit of movement speed. Movement speed is for PvP, not really for PvE. So your second passive is going to be Greed. Light attacks with your great axe give you 5% damage for 5 seconds, and it stacks 3 times. So if you attack 3 times with your light attacks, just your clicking, you're going to get 5% damage for 5 seconds. Meaning if you click 3 times fast, you're going to get a 15% damage buff for 5 seconds. Constantly. But you have to constantly click. So this is actually really good just for giving you flat damage buff. I would slot this if I had some points. I would suggest you slot this. Moving on to the next passive, Death's Embrace. Great axe attacks against foes below half health, penetrate armor by 10%. I wouldn't slot this. 10% armor penetration is probably good for like elites or tanks, but it's not enough. It doesn't do enough for me personally to change my skill points from what I'm putting them into currently, because I'm going for damage, and that doesn't really give me that much more damage, right? It's just armor pen, 10% more. Some of these abilities are so much better, like the 15% straight out damage buff for light attacking, and some of the other ones I'm going to read to you right now. So if you have some left over, if you have some skill points left over, put it in there. It still gives you a little bit of damage, but not worth putting in there first. Critical Gains is your next passive. When you make a critical hit with a great axe, you heal yourself for 10% of the damage done. This is a passive that I recommend for anyone doing a great axe build, because great axes have a lot of critical modifiers built into their kit, and that's one of them. So you're healing 10% of what any of your criticals you do, including off your abilities. Frustration is another ability you have. After one of your attacks is blocked, gain 15% damage for 10 seconds. You only get 1 stack of that, so you can only block once, and you get the 10 seconds of 15% more damage. This is actually really good for PvP, not good for PvE. Very rarely you're going to fight mobs that are blocking, and the ones that you do are like 25 to 30% of the time. So this is not enough necessity for me to slot this right now. But for PvP, when you're fighting people, they're going to be blocking you. So that's really good. I would get this if you're going for PvP. Keen Edge, critical damage is increased by 10%. Once again, another critical damage modifier, or critical modifier. Slot this as soon as possible. You want to stack your crits. Anything with critical modifying, get that first. You're basically just doing more damage on your crits, which will scale with your healing off of your crits, as well as your other abilities will scale off the crit too. So like I said before, this is a critical great axe build. You want to slot all the critical things first. Feed is going to heal you for 10% of your damage done against foes below 30%. If you're having trouble surviving, slot Feed. If you go down the execute tree, Unstoppable Greed makes your execute gains grit, and now you can't be stopped in the animation. And underneath that one, you're getting execute critical hits 100% of the time to anyone under half HP. So if you combo 300% damage, critting 100% of the time under half HP or under 30% health, combo that with Feed, now you're healing for 10% of the damage you do. You're gonna heal a massive amount for executing people under 30% health. So that's a really good one for survivability. If you're having trouble surviving, if you need a little boost, slot Feed as soon as possible. Second to last, Critical Condition. That's another one of your critical modifiers. Great Axe's attacks against foes below a 30% health will crit 15% more often. 15% crit chance to anyone under 30% health. Slot it ASAP. Last but not least, Bloodlust. You're moving 30% faster and dealing 15% more damage flat out when you're looking at a foe within 15 meters. Not only are you moving faster towards it, 30% faster, you're dealing flat 15% more damage. What we're going to do now is we're going to showcase the abilities of Reaper. We're going to start off with Reap. So I'm going to showcase what Reap does. So Q, pull, whip around. Reap is your Q. Pull, twirl. You do damage on the pull, you do damage on the twirl. Your R is going to be your run at them, swing. You run, you swing. Very simple. If you slot the final passive on that ability, you're going to be able to click whenever you want and stop yourself and hit at the same time. Last but not least, we're going to showcase the execute, so we're going to get him low. We're looking for 30% health, so one more hit. All right, 2 more hits. There we go. So he's at 30% health. Let me just break his shield, and now we execute. 1,400 crit damage. Your execute is extremely important. 1,400 crit damage on an execute. Next, we're going to be going over the Mauler section. For the Mauler section, you have Maelstrom. Fast spinning attack that pulls targets closer to you and deals some damage. It's a spin attack that drags them towards you and you deal some damage. Very simple. Whirlwind. Spin attack that deals 50% weapon damage to all nearby foes. If you hit a foe, spin again. You can do it 4 times. You can move while spinning. This attack cannot backstab, meaning you can't hit him in the back and do more damage. So it's basically a spin to win move. You're just spinning in a circle, cycloning, dealing damage. Gravity Well, you throw your axe and then you pull the enemies near it into the center, wherever you threw it, and it ends with a little bit of damage. These abilities are really good for crowd controlling. You get hit while holding a great axe below half your health. You're gaining extra stamina, so 40 stamina. That's about half your stamina bar, your block bar, your dodge bar. 20-second cooldown. Heavy pull is a heavy attack with a great axe. Will pull them closer to you. So if you hit something with a heavy attack, you're going to pull them closer to you. Enduring Strike adds grit to your heavy attacks, extremely important, and it adds 20% damage reduction while your grit is active. Slot that as soon as possible. Your next passive is going to be after you cause a pull, your foe is held for 30% longer. PvP, very useful because you can keep them in place a little longer. PvE, not so useful. When you block an attack with a great axe, you gain 5% damage for 5 seconds. This is probably one of the better passives it has because you can sit there just holding block, get 3 stacks of that, so you're at 15% damage bonus. That's a really good ability to have PvE and PvP. I would slot that also as soon as possible. Now, your Center of Attention passive is going to be, while holding a great axe, gain 10% damage when 3 or more foes are within 4 meters. That's really good for you if you're doing crowd controlling. For AoE damage, I would slot that as soon as possible. That's extremely important. Center of Attention, slot that if you're doing this build. Crowded Protection, while holding a great axe, you gain 10% damage reduction when 3 or more foes are within 4 meters. Now we're going to go down the individual ability passives. We're going to start off with Maelstrom. Maelstrom's reach extends the reach of Maelstrom pull range by 50%. So it allows you to grab enemies from further with the pull when it pulls them in. Absorb consumes all projectiles while it's active. So while you're spinning, anything that's shot at you or anything that they're trying to do that's a projectile within that circle gets absorbed. You won't take damage. No Reprieve is your final ability on Maulers. Maelstrom does an extra spin attack, pulling in foes again and dealing 110% damage. I would get this because you're basically doubling your damage and pulling twice. The first passive is going to be Whirlwind's maximum number of rotations increased to 7, so that's really good. I would slot this as soon as possible because now instead of spinning 4 times, you're spinning 7, meaning you're doing more damage because each spin does a certain amount of damage. So slot this ASAP. Good for both PvE, PvP. Unending Winds gives you 50% increased movement speed while you're doing Whirlwind. So now you're spinning super fast, right? You're not doing more damage, you're moving super fast. So you're spinning and you're moving super fast while you're spinning. Doesn't directly affect your damage, just your movement speed. Surrounded's the final passive. If you have 3 or more foes around you, you deal 30% more damage. This is really good for PvE. When you're doing dungeons and you have multiple foes around you, Crowded Well is going to be the first passive on your Gravity Well, which is the ability that you throw your axe and you pull them in towards it and does damage on the release. Increases your burst damage by 10% for each foe caught in it. Unyielding gives allies 20% fortify while standing in your well. So now your well, if you're standing in it or your allies are standing in it, you're giving 20% fortify, which reduces damage. So 20% damage reduction while you're standing in it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to showcase the abilities. Your Q is just a Whirlwind. So I did the same move twice. That's if you have that passive slotted. Your next ability is going to be your R. This is literally your spin to win. You hit, spin, hit, spin. You literally just keep pressing R until your R runs out. You have 7 rotations of it if you slot the 7 rotation passive. So it starts with 4 only, but you can get up to 7 turns by slotting that passive. Your F is your Gravity Well. So you throw it and it'll pull them and keep them in there and then do damage when it's done. Super cool to use in PvE when there's groups of mobs and you can drag them all into that. Really good. Once again, this build is for crowd controlling. You're basically playing this build to kill large groups of enemies very fast. All right, guys, so that's going to actually conclude today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure you like and subscribe so you guys can keep up with more content on my YouTube channel. And if you guys want to see this content live, go follow my Twitch at Theatrix. You can click on any of my Twitch links and it'll take you there.